The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
As I'm sure you probably know, shooters and bombers are overwhelmingly male. And yesterday we had an incident with the rare female shooter, a 39-year-old female, ostensibly a YouTuber, although she had a YouTube channel that was really quite small, opened fire with a handgun at YouTube's San Bruno, California headquarters. Our YouTube rep works there, and I immediately reached out to him to see if he's okay based on the profiles published about the 3 victims who were shot, but all will hopefully pull through. I don't think that he was one of them, but this was right in there at that San Bruno office where we have contact on basically a weekly basis. And she did manage to injure 3 people, one critical, one serious, one not so serious, all taken to the hospital. Ultimately, the shooter was found dead from what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And there are a lot of questions around this. Early reports were that the shooter actually asked for one of the 3 victims by name, which suggested that she knew him at least to some degree. But then later police said that there's actually no evidence whatsoever that the shooter knew any of the victims. Does that mean she never asked for anyone, or does that mean she did ask for someone, but that individual was not ultimately one of the 3 people that were shot? I don't know. But because she was someone who uploaded videos to YouTube, it's conceivable that it was someone she was in touch with for YouTube-related business. We really don't know at this point. What we do know is that some of the videos on her YouTube channel, which has since been taken down, were critical of YouTube itself. And the specific YouTube angle is actually a big part of this. The shooter had gone missing previously, and her dad called the police, was worried about her, indicated that she had been sort of expressing rage at YouTube, which apparently was caused by YouTube no longer paying her for posting videos online. Unclear if that means the videos individually were singled out for demonetization or whether the entire channel was pulled out of the partner program. She was eventually found in her car about 30 miles from YouTube headquarters. She believed that YouTube employees were specifically reducing or holding down the number of views that her videos were getting, encouraging her to stop making videos. Whether that's true or not, we just don't know at this point. And as far as the victims, at the time they arrived at the hospital, as I mentioned, one was in critical condition, one in serious condition, one in fair condition, and we don't yet have more news about that. But I do want to talk about the gender angle. The gender angle does stand out because in the U.S., as I'm sure you know if you are paying attention to the news with some frequency, most shooters or bombers or whatever are young white men. And when they're not, they're either middle-aged white men or they are young Arab men, often adherents to the Muslim faith, but predominantly in the U.S., young white men. Women make up only 4% of mass shooting suspects. And that also is an interesting angle because I'm talking about the profile of mass shooting suspects. But what happened yesterday, depending on which definition you use for a mass shooting, might not even count because mass shootings are often defined as incidents where 4 or more people are shot, not including the shooter. Only 3 people were shot here. And I was just thinking this morning as I was reading articles and trying to learn what happened, how crazy is our world where the reality is that when only 3 people get shot in a single incident, it doesn't usually count as a mass shooting. It's not usually characterized as a mass shooting. And if you go and look at gunviolencearchive.org, which keeps track of incidents, gun violence incidents, and you look at the number of shootings where 3 people were shot, you'll realize that when you look at the, quote, total number of mass shootings, it is a drastic understatement of what we might colloquially understand to be mass shootings because an incident where 3 people are shot doesn't even count as a mass shooting. Donald Trump, of course, sharing thoughts and prayers on Twitter, which at this point, I don't even know what to make of it. Donald Trump tweeting yesterday, was just briefed on the shooting at YouTube's headquarters in San Bruno, California. Our thoughts and prayers are with everybody involved. Not much else to say about that. We've had sort of the conversation about thoughts and prayers as opposed to action when it comes to guns. And it's yet another example of someone trying to solve a problem with guns, whether this was a real or only a perceived problem that people at YouTube were trying to prevent this shooter from making money. I don't know. Maybe we'll sometimes find out, but it's yet another example of something that is fundamentally a cultural issue. It might have mental illness components, gun safety components, but the concept of going and shooting because someone's doing something to my YouTube channel.
It's an interesting story, and we'll see how it unfolds, but I was checking out this woman's Social Blade profile. She only had about 12,000 subscribers, maybe 5 million video views, which probably isn't enough to make a living. So losing that amount of money that she was making would not be a reason to go out and kill people or kill herself. So it's pretty bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what other income she had. We don't know if she had another job. We don't know what percentage of her total income came from the YouTube channel or what that income was. And I mean, I would argue that no matter how big one's YouTube channel is, losing the income from their YouTube channel wouldn't be a reason to go out and to start shooting people. We'll see what we learn about this in the coming 24 to 48 hours. As predicted, the trade war, effectively, launched by Donald Trump by putting tariffs on steel and aluminum, is starting to ramp up. China is now jumping right in on this. Not only has Donald Trump announced that there will be tariffs on imported steel as well as aluminum, but now Trump has announced a new list of specific Chinese imports that are going to be targeted. And in response, the Chinese government completely expectedly, completely predictably, has announced new tariffs on more than 100 American products. This is going to be a 25% tariff. It will include all sorts of products, including cars, whiskey, soybeans, corn, wheat, various types of beefs and meats, orange juice, tobacco of different kinds, a variety of different textiles and chemicals, and a number of different industrial products. This immediately hit American stock markets. Dow futures prior to today's opening down more than 500 points. The market very, very erratic throughout the day. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's really difficult to win a trade war. And you've got a lot of Trumpists cheering that we're making products more expensive for the Chinese. Okay, but they might not realize how much of our stuff goes to China and how much our economy and American businesses depend on Chinese purchases of our products. China's population is 1.4 billion, almost. And every year, their middle class grows significantly in raw numbers. Their upper middle class grows significantly in raw numbers. And the demand, the number of people in China that want to buy American stuff, American beef or corn, oranges, it's really big. And when you make everything 25% more expensive, that is going to decrease demand drastically. And exporting to China is a huge market for American companies. They're going to get crushed because China's putting these tariffs on our products. And this is not me saying China's never done anything wrong. China is just a panacea as far as a global trading partner. No, there's lots of criticisms to make of China. We can talk about unfair trade practices from China, which Donald Trump claims to know about, although really it's just a talking point for him. We can talk about China's arguable theft of intellectual property from other countries, including the United States. This is not China is perfect, but just starting to put tariffs on stuff is effectively a race to the economic bottom that's going to be horrible for American farmers. It's going to be terrible for American manufacturers and businesses of all kinds in the United States. And to give you a sense of the scale here, because again, China, 1.4 billion people almost, United States, 330 million in population. China's putting a tariff on about 100 products from the United States. Trump's tariff list for China is way, way bigger, but the Chinese list encompasses about half of all American exports to China, whereas the very long list of Trump's products represents only about 10% of Chinese exports to the United States. So right away, you see how this is not exactly a situation that Donald Trump is setting the United States economy and the United States business community up to win. And it's already setting the United States up to get crushed. American companies are not going to do well here. American consumers are going to have to pay higher and higher prices for a lot of stuff technical term stuff that comes from China. And more than likely, you're going to see the political repercussions be that the committed Trumpist blames China instead of Donald Trump, who's actually the one who sort of started this thing. Now, the Trumpist will also say, David, it's unfair to say that Trump is actually the one who started this, because Trump was handed a situation that President Obama could have done something about when it comes to trade imbalances and different issues with trade, and he didn't. So Trump is not the catalyst here. Trump is being thrown into this thing midstream. Now, that being said, there are also ways for the Chinese to sort of circumvent the tariffs and keep selling their cheap goods to the United States. One way, which is done with some frequency, is that the Chinese products, which would have a tariff on them if brought directly to the United States, can be sold to another country, India, Malaysia, and there they can be effectively repackaged as Indian or Malaysian goods and sold to the United States. And so you can very quickly see how this is going to be bad, really bad for the American economy. And I generally question the predictive ability of economists, right? Economists have proven time and again to be pretty incompetent at making economic predictions, particularly a couple of years out. But there are discussions of triggering a sort of 2008 style recession if this continues. And I'm not, some people on the right like to say the left is cheering for America to fail and for a recession merely so that they can say we were right about Trump. That's not me. That's never been me. And I stand to lose just like everybody else through paying higher prices for products, stock market losses. As people know, I basically am invested widely in mutual funds that encompass the entire stock market. I don't pick stocks. So I'm not cheering nor hoping for a problem for the American economy, but there are starting to be discussions about what might be a pretty serious recession, and the early stock market numbers today are not good in the sense of being scary. Send me your thoughts on this. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show, and we'll be talking about this and a lot of other related topics online as well as on our subreddit.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Michael Orlando. Michael, thank you. We do depend on the support of members like Michael who sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. And I don't want to forget our long-term and sustaining members who've been with us, some for about 8 years. Brian Bruning is today's David Pakman Show sustaining member of the day, who has been with us since January of 2012. And I can't thank you enough. Michael, Brian, thank you. You can sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. We do have a coupon code available. That coupon code is VoteSoon18, and that will save you a tidy sum, 40% off, if you use the coupon code VoteSoon18. All right, let's get into this week's Hatriot Mail. Quick reminder about what Hatriot Mail is.
Because we cling to our guns and our God, but somehow totally cool with a billionaire who wants to assault our wife.
Right.
Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
All right, so if I have to sort of sum up the theme of this week's Hatriot Mail, we've had a lot of more alt-right Hatriot Mail, which is less religious in nature. This time, we're going more in the direction of the religious-based Hatriot Mail. Take a listen.
I noticed that there are a large number of homosexuals associated with continual attacks on the president. Why is that? I don't know. Do they have a little club going? Jude 7-8. 7. As Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them in a similar manner to these, having given themselves over to sexual immorality and gone after strange flesh, are set forth as an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. 8. Likewise, also these dreamers defile the flesh, reject authority, and speak evil of dignitaries.
Whenever people just throw scripture at me, my eyes immediately glaze over and I just don't care. I just tune out immediately because who cares what Judas 7, I don't even know what that was, Jude 7 and 8, what is that?
I don't know. It seems like a lot of work, too. You got to go find the passage, copy and paste it over. I wouldn't be willing to do that.
Oh, these people are religious enough that they don't need copy and paste. I mean, they just know this stuff off the top of their heads, like the Westboro Baptist Church people. You can give a middle finger to the Hatriots by using the coupon code Hatriot40. If when you go to davidpakman.com/membership, you pick a membership, monthly, yearly, whichever. On the second page of the sign-up, there's a coupon code field, and if you use the coupon code Hatriot40, you'll save 40%, and it is a big FU to the Hatriots who would like to see the show fail. And actually, that's the next thing I want to talk about. Not everybody is pleased about the expansion that I've proposed to you for the David Pakman Show. Last week, I told you we've got a goal, right? We were thinking about, is it time for the end? Are we ending? Are we wrapping up the David Pakman Show? The answer is no. We're expanding the David Pakman Show. And the way we want to do it is by strengthening our staffing, adding an additional part-time producer position so that we will be able to have rotating staff vacations and continue doing new programming during the breaks, during the previous vacation breaks, rather than just running repeats. And in order to do that, we're targeting 500 new paid supporters to the show. The most common complaints about the show are, David, I wish that the show was longer and had fewer commercials, and I wish that there were more shows every year, that there weren't these breaks for 1 or 2 weeks at a time when staff goes on vacation. And I understand that. And the best way to fix that is by increasing our staffing so that we don't have to simply go off the air during breaks. And that will also allow us to be able to afford getting rid of some of the advertisers and replacing that advertising time in the hour show with content. So there are 3 ways that we are building this list of 500 new supporters. Number 1, and we're totally agnostic between these 3 different methods. Number 1 is membership, right? You go to davidpakman.com/membership, you sign up, that counts as 1 of 500. If you want a discount off of membership, we've got a coupon code, which is VoteSoon18, and by all means, feel free to use it. Method number 2 is Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/DavidPakmanShow, become a patron. This starts at just $1 a month. That counts towards the 500 new financial supporters. And lastly, this is a beta thing that's available, YouTube sponsorship. If you go to our YouTube channel, you'll notice that both on the homepage and on the internal video pages, there is a blue sponsor button that you can press. And this is something that not every channel has been invited to participate in. It is $4.99 a month, and it also counts towards those 500 supporters. Now, the good news is that we're up to 64. We have already gained 64 supporters across these 3 methods towards our goal of 500. The sort of sad news is that there are people getting in touch and saying, David, I hope you don't get to the 500. I hope the show fails. The phrase circling the drain is a popular one with some alt-rightists that they like to throw at me in terms of what they believe to be the status of the show. And we've actually got a voicemail that sort of relates to the desire for the demise of the David Pakman Show from some people in our audience. I am confident that we're going to hit the 500 and that we're going to make an additional hire and that we're going to do additional shows. Although it's important to be aware of the fact that there are adversaries, there are haters, and every single person that says, hey, you know what, I'm going to become a member, or I'll throw in $1 a month on Patreon, or I will become a YouTube sponsor, every single one of those people is pushing back against someone who would really like to see the show disappear and go the way of all those shows that no longer exist. Donald Trump said yesterday that he plans to send the U.S. military to the U.S.-Mexico border to guard it until he's able to build that wall of his and further restrict immigration. And the immigration-related tirade of the last few days kind of started over the weekend on Twitter. It continued earlier this week, Donald Trump taking to Twitter and saying, as ridiculous as it sounds, the laws of our country do not easily allow us to send those crossing our southern border back where they came from. A whole big wasted procedure must take place. Mexico and Canada have tough immigration laws, whereas ours are an Obama joke. Act, Congress. following this up yesterday with another tweet. Trump's new favorite word is caravan, which sometimes he pronounces correctly, sometimes he doesn't, tweeting, "The big caravan of people," people capitalized, of course, "from Honduras, now coming across Mexico and heading to our weak laws border, had better be stopped before it gets there. Cash cow NAFTA is in play, as is foreign aid to Honduras and the countries that allow this to happen. Congress must act now." And if you couldn't understand what the hell he was talking about in those tweets, here is Trump speaking yesterday, rehashing, restating this, and saying the military will be guarding the southern border soon.
But I told Mexico very strongly, you're going to have to do something about these caravans that are coming up. And I just noticed that the caravan now, which is toward the middle of Mexico, coming up from Honduras, is breaking up very rapidly. That's because Mexico has very strong immigration laws, as we should have. We should have those laws. We don't have. We have immigration laws that are laughed at by everybody. It's like we have no border because we had Obama make changes. President Obama made changes that basically created no border. It's called catch and release. We're going to be doing things militarily until we can have a wall and proper security. We're going to be guarding our border with the military. We will be doing things with Mexico, and they have to do it. Otherwise, I'm not going to do the NAFTA deal.
So I have to tell you, I'm not really against this in the sense that if our military is on the southern border, that's some of our military that can't go bomb someone or start a war, right? So like in a sense, if you said to me, David, if you just in a vacuum had to pick, would you rather the military doing who knows what overseas, or would you rather them standing around the southern border? Which would you prefer? I would actually say the southern border. And in particular, as I've told you before, as a way of cracking down on undocumented immigration, military on the southern border is of sort of limited value, since a lot of undocumented immigration is people flying in and overstaying visas or coming in as tourists or whatever else. But there's another issue here, which is that it's not really legal for the military to do domestic law enforcement, right? There are laws which say that you are not allowed to deploy the military for domestic law enforcement. And that's why when you see National Guards get involved near borders, like, for example, the California National Guard on the California-Mexico border, it's similar to what those militia groups were sort of supposedly doing, which is just kind of watching and pointing and calling the Border Patrol and saying, hey, here's what's going on, you should show up here. I wonder, though, is Border Patrol starting to get annoyed by what Donald Trump is doing? Because if Trump is successful, right, a lot of them would be out of jobs. If the Border Patrol is replaced, or at least its need is eliminated because you do this wall, which Trump says is just going to be fantastic, and you've got the military down there on top of that, doesn't that decrease the demand for Border Patrol officers? And I know that by and large, the Border Patrol, at least as far as I recall, Border Patrol seems to sort of like Donald Trump and like what he's doing. I don't know that we will need as many Border Patrol agents between the wall and the military, which Donald Trump is going to deploy there. Now, we don't know when Trump says this, which military is going to be deployed. Is it going to be active duty military who are not allowed to do domestic law enforcement? Is it going to be a state National Guard, which would be allowed to sort of stand around and call Border Patrol? And in the past, Trump has mentioned this before. And when he's mentioned it before, aides later kind of walk it back and say, well, listen, President Trump is open to this idea. And if necessary, if we can't get moving on the wall, this is something that he's going to do. But as of right now, there's not actually any planned deployment of troops to the border. As usual, it seems that Trump is sort of speaking based on something he came up with 30 seconds before the camera got turned on. And his agenda seems to be set by Fox News, because Trump now is obsessed with this word caravan. He tweeted about it. He's been saying it at every opportunity. That's been a really popular buzzword on Fox News lately. Fox News talking about the caravan that Trump is referring to. And I'm actually starting to think, now that Trump has been on this sort of rampage about the caravan on Twitter over the last few days, and then yesterday coming out with the military is going to the border, is this another preemptive distraction because something else big is about to break? And I guess we'll just have to wait and see. My other thought on this is the following. I'm not a government is becoming tyrannical type of guy, right? Our audience knows that's not my thing. I don't talk about we need handguns to protect ourselves from a tyrannical government. That's not my shtick. But moving to deploy the military for domestic law enforcement, it's probably a move in the direction of martial law and police states and tyrannical government, right? I'm not a slippery slope guy, and I'm not saying Trump sending military to the border means we will soon be in an authoritarian, martial law, tyrannical government situation. But if we say, is a deployment of the military domestically a move towards so-called tyrannical government or away from so-called tyrannical government, the answer is pretty obviously towards tyrannical government. So we'll see if this ends up happening, and I'm sure we don't have to wait and see whether the normal people that say we got to protect ourselves from a tyrannical government, they're not going to say, hey, wait a second, isn't domestic deployment of the military the thing we talk about when we justify our need for guns and rifles and shotguns? You're not going to hear it from them. Take a quick break. Back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
We're continuing our conversation with Kelly Jones. She was previously married to Alex Jones of Infowars fame. Kelly, a few other small things I want to ask about before we sort of circle back to the big picture here of what's going on with custody and your concerns around the kids. The supplement sales. We know that this stuff is hugely profitable for Infowars. Everything from so-called male vitality to all sorts of other stuff. I don't even have to name the stuff. I don't believe any of it works. I believe it's been widely debunked by the scientific community. But my question to you in the context of whether we have a character or not in the salesman of these supplements is, does Alex Jones believe that the supplements are snake oil, or does he believe in the supplements?
I think he believes that the supplements are highly profitable to him. I was absolutely opposed in writing and expressed to our joint attorney of our business that I did not want these supplements formed, and he did this. This is sort of all post. Actually, he was forming these secretly in preparation, I believe, for divorce, because not only did I lose my kids, but I lost all but 10% of our business and all future earnings. And that's where he had worked all of the majority of our estate back into. I actually think a lot of it was a smokescreen. And of course, the thing that bothers me the most about the supplements, and when he holds a big censorship drive about YouTube's going to take him down, which we can talk about later, David, if you want, about how they have reason to, but they're not, is that he's using it to fund litigation against me and my kids and to keep me in this litigation hell. It was over $6 million combined to get us to the trial that you guys saw or read about. And the litigation did not stop. Alex kept filing after that. I'm up against a juggernaut. And when people buy things from him or they support his donation drive, they need to understand they're actually actively funding litigation to keep kids from their mama. And my kids love me. They love me, you know?
Wow. As far as the relationship with Trump goes, I've read that you were sort of disturbed or maybe shocked about the embrace of Trump. What's your sense of it now that we're, more than a year into that? And I don't even know, I'm not keeping up enough to know whether the attitude towards Trump is shifting at all or isn't. I know the Roger Stone co-hosting and all of this stuff. What was your feeling when that was going on?
I mean, really, I cannot believe it, honestly. I think that, the people that are watching you now or checking me out on Twitter or whatever, they don't really have the history or understanding of who Alex was. Maybe some people, because I have a lot of liberal supporters coming forward. I am really just not that political of a person, but I consider myself to be just, I care about the Constitution and due process and things like that. But there was a time when liberals were really listening to Alex because he was never a partisan person. So all of a sudden, Alex's star starts rising when Roger Stone comes on the scene. And all of a sudden, Alex Jones is an actual, there's no way to look at him other than a propagandist, because everything that he said he was against, overreaching police actions, your papers, please, all of these things, he's absolutely gone against his core beliefs and expressed values, which I actually believe he believed. He'd stop at the border, on the way in with a family vacation and make us endure him harassing border police. But now it's all great for Donald Trump. And it's highly concerning. I went to this site called SEMrush, where you can look at the analytics of his rise and how it's proportionate to Trump's rise, but also the funding that went into Google to make these, to perpetuate or boost his viewership. And there's an article on my site, custodywars.com, asking about, what exactly is, YouTube or Google's stance on Alex, because apparently, according to an ex-Google engineer, there was a guy who came forward and said he wrote an algorithm that recommended Alex billions of times.
Yeah.
So I believe right now that YouTube has real cause and should act upon what Alex said, if it's true, that he was pending one strike to have his YouTube channel taken down. I'm not mincing words here. I don't think he should have a YouTube channel. He's currently defaming me on it, but worse, he's putting my minor son on it, right? But in fact, Alex is profiting greatly off of Google. And so it's all just very questionable. And it actually circles back also to this question that's come up with Sinclair Broadcasting. Alex was first kind of picked up out of nowhere. He was on little mom and pops that maybe he paid for, maybe he didn't, or he'd go on and off on shortwave radio, on a paid shortwave time, to a syndication out of KLBJ-AM by Bob Sinclair, who actually came down. And so I find that really suspect. And I think the most suspect thing that people can really look at when they're looking at this, and they're looking at, wow, maybe our media is just totally not independent, which is really what I'm beginning to feel. And even social media, like these huge concerns that we have, right? This guy, Alex Jones, he was not only nonpartisan, he was anti-partisan. He would say these are two sides of the same coin. It's a dog and pony show. Well, he's picked his coin. He's holding it up like a badge of honor. He shined it on his shirt, and he's holding it up, and his name is Donald Trump, and it makes zero sense for
Kelly,
anybody who knows him.
Do you know if he remains in contact with Donald Trump, or how recently he remained in private contact with Trump?
I hear little snippets from people that I know that know him, and I think that there is probably some contact. I'm not for sure on that. I divorced the guy.
You've said that he would sometimes perform drunk, and I have two questions about that. How frequently was that, and was the drinking also an issue in your household?
It's a horrible issue. I'm not going to get into all the serious substance abuse issues, but I will say that, there were multiple CPS reportable offenses that came before the court, and when it came before the jury, the judge covered up a lot of this. And this Judge Erlinda Naranjo, is not only bad in my case, she's bad in other people's cases. So I'm actually seeking Travis County justice and trying to push the AG to indict, as they should, for criminal acts that they know have happened. But yes, substance abuse was a major issue. Lack of control and raging was a major issue. It was a nightmare to be with him. It was horrible. And especially towards the end, it was awful, untenable. Why did I stay in it so long? It's a domestic violence cycle. But he was also gone a lot. Like, if you view his coverage or look at anything he used to say, he literally was never home. So the exposure was minimal. When I saw my kids starting to emulate some things, that's when I said, boy, I've been, like a lot of domestic violence victims, fooling myself that this isn't having an effect on them. And I had been able to provide them a relatively normal life within the constraints of the bizarre conspiratory, cocoon of Alex. But yeah.
What do you believe is Alex Jones' perspective about his audience? In other words, does he think that these are moral and intelligent people who have the sense to follow him and listen to what he says? Does he see them as sort of useful idiots, or what? What's your sense of that?
Yeah, I posted, I can't remember the clip with Andy Griffith where remember that old movie where he's like becomes a famous star, but then he's caught on camera making fun of his viewers?
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. I think that he uses people. And, in Alex's defense, and I just have to say it, he's just not a well guy. He's got serious issues. And so the problem is that there were people in place who could have helped my family with that. He's not a person who's in control of himself or living the way that you and I live. He doesn't perceive reality like you and I do. And it really is all a cult of self, beyond anything else, which is just so sad. I mean, where did that come from? Hurt people or hurt other people. I guess that what I've seen my kids go through and the effects it's had on them has given me sort of a heightened compassion for really troubled people. But it's a sad, horrible, tragic situation.
What would you say, Kelly, to people who will watch our interview, they'll listen to it, and they'll say, listen, I'm hearing what Kelly is saying, but, she had a very, very ugly divorce. Divorces often get ugly, and the things that are said after divorces are often not necessarily sticking to the facts. There's reasons why she would want to present him as this sort of out-of-control person. What do you say to that? Because that's something that people will no doubt say.
Yeah, a lot of people like to judge and jump to conclusions and say it's a personal matter, it's sour grapes. And what I've been saying, it's not sour grapes. It's actually about civil liberties. I'm actively appealing unconstitutional orders that preclude me from actually uttering certain words about Alex or saying certain things. The grand irony of that, of course, is that Alex Jones markets himself off a platform of free speech. But beyond that, my orders are punitive and there's injunctions only against me. They're totally unconstitutional. And in the city of Austin, Texas, and Travis County, there are real live corrupt monsters that will lie and aid people like Alex Jones to take kids from good parents. These people are guilty of crimes like aggravated perjury, false reporting, I believe bribery. There's a lot of real crime here. So that's why I'm speaking out. And I'm actually not just speaking out for me and mine, but also for the people of Travis County. I'm irate and outraged at the Texas Judicial Commission, who has 3 other complaints against this judge. And I urge them to come forward and do what's right and to impeach her immediately. This should have happened long ago. The Texas Attorney General needs to stop acting like family court is where the law doesn't matter. It's where the law should matter the most. It's the most vulnerable segment of our society, our children, and 40 to 50% of all first marriages end in divorce. So everybody should be concerned about what happened to me and my unconstitutional orders, because they can become case law for you and yours. Family court corruption is pervasive. If you follow me, actually, I think the best place to see that, I have lots of online presences. I have custodywars.com, where I've outlined like my defamation suit and my appeal. I have my Twitter account, which is AlexJones_X, but actually on Facebook at Kelly Jones. If people go there and they see all the people that are communicating with me about their own family court nightmares, I know that my case and the reason why I'm coming out so hard too, is I divorced Alex Jones. And everybody looked at me and gaslit me and said I was a liar and worse, and treated me horribly, victim shamed me when I came forward with serious concerns about abuse and neglect and other things. If that can happen to me with Alex Jones, there's people back there, all over Travis and all over this country who don't have the possibility of this kind of publicity because they didn't divorce a notorious, unwell person. But I did. Doesn't that concern you, America, that this is happening in family court? It's not. Family court is the court that most money passes through in all the courts combined in this country. And it's a court which more people will pass through, right? Yep. So everybody should be concerned. And the criminals that act criminally in family court need to come to justice.
Kelly Jones, you can check out her website, custodywars.com. I really appreciate you spending some time talking to me today about this.
I really appreciate the opportunity, David. Thank you so much.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Breaking news. We have the first prison sentence coming from Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller's Trump-Russia investigation. The indictee is 33-year-old Dutch lawyer Alex van der Zwaan. He lied about his contacts with a top Trump campaign official and a believed Russian spy. He was found guilty, and he has been sentenced to 30 days in prison, and he will also be paying a fine of $20,000. He will then be deported back to, I believe he actually lives in Germany, even though he is originally Dutch. Not exactly something that sounds like a super harsh sentence, but the truth is that if you consider the normal sentence for just telling a single lie to the to law enforcement, it's actually sort of serious, right? 30 days for a sentence that's considered for a crime that often just gets probation is not nothing. And there are lots of people saying, well, but hold on, he got 1 month and there was potentially a 6-month maximum sentence. That's a fair statement, but most people end up not serving any jail time for just a single isolated lie to authorities. There's no money laundering here. There's no other crimes that would sort of enhance that sentence. But at the same time, when you hear the guy got 30 days while a woman on parole who accidentally voted illegally is getting 5 years, you're understandably a bit confused, and I really get that. But the real tragedy of the 30-day sentence is that it's going to provide serious ammunition for the committed Make America Great Again Trumpists to say, look at this, never-ending investigation, endless interviews, millions of dollars spent, and 30 days of prison to a Dutch lawyer. This is a witch hunt. To whom I would just say, listen, we're still in the early stages of this investigation here. And van der Zwaan is connected to Russia in that he's the son-in-law of a Russian oligarch who owns Alpha Bank. That's a bank that we've talked about before, and it's at the center of a lot of, I guess we would call them coincidences, although I tend not to believe in those types of coincidences. And this is the 5th guilty plea in Robert Mueller's investigation of Trump-Russia, first that leads to a prison sentence so far. And the big indictments, of course, have been Paul Manafort, his business associate Rick Gates, Michael Flynn, and Trump policy advisor George Papadopoulos. And van der Zwaan was never a major player. He's not even really a major link. He's someone who incidentally lied to investigators in the course of them looking into the real potential criminals. And still, he's ending up with a felony on his record, getting deported when he gets out of jail. And I believe that, you know what, I think I said Germany. I believe he actually lives in the UK. He is a Dutch lawyer, but he doesn't live in the Netherlands. I believe it's the UK where he lives. So sentence number 1, make of it what you will. My presumption is this will not be the last sentence in Robert Mueller's investigation. I have a story that might seem like it is about police abuse of power, and it sort of is, but it's also another indictment of the failed war on drugs and just the general absurdity of what we're doing with regard to drugs in many parts of our country. There's a New Jersey man who was pulled over in Southampton, New Jersey. He ended up having what is often described as a cavity search, a search of his anus and genitals for marijuana by police. He was stopped by police on suspicion of tailgating another vehicle. The video of the traffic stop has been released. I'm not going to play it for you now, but it is widely available online. This took place some months ago, but the video and the details have only now been released. And the police claimed, hey, we smell marijuana. That justifies searching the vehicle. Eventually, they moved on to the motorist's person. And without any search warrant or consent, they did a cavity search. And they are supposed to have either consent or a search warrant. The motorist at one point said, did you find it? Did you find it? You guys are really ridiculous. You might as well ask me on an effing date. So certainly we can talk about the actions of the police and the rationale used by the police to make the decision to do the cavity search. And that's a legitimate story because the police had no search warrant nor consent, and a lawsuit has now been filed by the motorist. But the real story here for me, sort of a broader story, which is, why would police ever be looking in someone's anus for marijuana? And the reason why is that in some states, marijuana is illegal and it's criminal for recreational use. And that includes the state of New Jersey, although they do have medical marijuana currently, and the current governor he promised to legalize marijuana during the first 100 days in office. He's almost there, and he hasn't done that yet. But we should never be searching people's anuses and genitals for marijuana, because having marijuana for personal use should just not be a criminal matter. It should not be a criminal issue. It should not be illegal. Now, even though marijuana is illegal in New Jersey recreationally, that still doesn't mean cops are just allowed to do this and necessarily get away with it. So as I mentioned, there is now a lawsuit by the motorist against the police, arguing that they needed consent or a search warrant, neither of which they had. That is what the law says. The cavity search is also supposed to be done by a doctor, nurse, practitioner, or nurse, which of course wasn't done, as the video shows. So this is an issue of law enforcement's abuse of power. This is a lawsuit, the results of which I will be following. But this is a broader issue of why are we doing this for marijuana anyway?
Right, and the terrifying thing is that this could happen to anyone. He was pulled over for tailgating. That's just following a car too closely. That seems a little bit subjective to me. And also, they never even found any marijuana on this person.
Yes.
So I don't know if this was just a power trip by the police officer. Maybe he's even getting some sexual gratification out of this.
Who
I don't
knows?
know, but it's disturbing.
We'll see what ultimately comes of the lawsuit. And the lawsuit is going to be, the lawsuit is going to determine civil penalties by and large. But the police investigation into this should be pretty cut and dry, right? Because whatever probable cause there was, they had no search warrant, they had no consent, they had no doctor, nurse, or nurse practitioner. So even if we grant that you can make up that you smell marijuana, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. If you want to take it to this level, you're supposed to have a search warrant or consent, and it's not supposed to be the police shoving their hands who knows where anyway. So we'll follow the lawsuit and see what happens. But big picture, the war on drugs is a failure. Our drug laws are completely broken in this country. And by the way, we still have marijuana at the federal level as a Schedule I drug, which is just absolutely and totally pathetic. Okay, we have a voicemail number that is 219-2-DAVID-P, which you can call any time of day at your leisure, at your pleasure, whatever it is that motivates you to call. And for some people, it is the wish for the demise of the David Pakman Show. I mentioned earlier when I told you about our project to get 500 new financial supporters of the show through membership, Patreon, or YouTube sponsorship, that there are people emailing me straight up wishing that we fail. Here is an example of this type of person who took the time to call in and leave me this beautiful message of hope and inspiration.
Your show sucks. It lacks intelligent commentary.
Right.
I would say it's probably the worst show I ever saw. I don't know who funds your show, but it will be short-lived. Just isn't interesting. You're going on and on about how pathetic Trump is. Your show is pathetic. You are pathetic. Why don't you go ahead and turn your show into how to deal with your homosexual desires to be less homosexual and more of a productive citizen?
What?
Go ahead and focus your show on that. Thank you.
Oh, man. So anyway, not worth rebutting these individuals, but they are out there. They exist. They want to see the show fail. And I am confident, based on the initial response we've seen from our audience to our proposal to add 500 supporters, that we're going to succeed, and this is going to be one sad person. And by the way, the show's been around for 10 years. So when he says that it's going to be short-lived, what on earth is this guy talking about, right? We've got a great bonus show coming up for you today. Parkland students return to school skeptical of clear backpacks. I've actually read quite a bit about the clear backpack and clear purse policies that some concert venues have been putting into place. Yellow cab drivers and riders are concerned about a new fee that is being put on yellow cabs in some parts of the United States, including New York City. We will also talk about Scott Pruitt's bizarre condo circumstances and just the continued, I guess I'd call them ethical questions about Scott Pruitt's financial decisions as head of the EPA. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. Coupon code is available. Vote soon 18 saves you 40%, and we'll speak to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.